population ecology. Okay, by the terms itself, or the terms there, you know that this is a study of populations and why their numbers change over time. Okay, how do the numbers of the members of a certain population change over time? That's population ecology. Now, this study here is very important because your scientists, your ecologists would use this to keep track of your endangered species, to keep track of your invasive species. Okay, so your ecologist would take a look at population ecology and would say that these species of squirrels, for example, are running out. These populations of grasshoppers, for example, are becoming endangered, okay, are almost going to become extinct, okay? Or they may also say that this type of pest is an invasive species. That means it is something that's new. Okay, that's precisely the reason why if you are traveling abroad, okay, say I'm from the Philippines and I go to the US, the immigration department, your immigration officers will not allow me to bring any produce. Okay, I cannot bring fruits or vegetables because they're thinking there might be some pests in those vegetables or fruits that can inversely or that can greatly affect the crops that you have here. Okay, so invasive species, endangered species, these are very important components of population ecology. Okay, and precisely the reason why population ecology is being studied. Okay, now again here, there are two very important terms. We've already talked about population yesterday. So again, we said you can only call a group a population if all of these individuals belong to the same species. Okay, if these individuals here do not belong to the same species, then we use the term community. Okay, but if they are all humans, then we say it is a population. Now, another term that you have is demography. Demography here is the statistical study of populations. Okay, so this is a study of populations using stats. This allows predictions to be made about how a population will change. According to the different information that you get from the stats of your population, you may make several conclusions, you may make several predictions. Okay, now your population dynamics, on the other hand, this is how your population would change. Okay, when you say dynamics, these are changes. So when you say population dynamics, this studies how a certain population would change. And there are three key features here: the population size, the population density, and population dispersion. We are going to the different terms here, different key features here, one by one, starting with your population size. Okay, now, of course, it's pretty obvious when you say population size, this is the number of individuals in an area. Okay, so this here is defined, characterized by your growth rate. Now, a long time ago, your scientists, your ecologists would only use birth rate minus the death rate, or natality minus mortality or morbidity, as the basis for growth rate. Okay, so before your scientists would say the number of babies being born minus the number of people who die, that would be equal to the growth rate of a certain population. Okay, now looking at the population growth of South Carolina here on your screen, you can see how the population of this state has grown over a period of time. Okay, so it all started in 1910. There was only 1.5 million people. This is in millions, okay? So only 1.5 million people in South Carolina in 1910. Now, by the 2000s, there's already roughly 4 million, okay? 4 million people. And now we're already in the year 2021. And so we know that this should be almost 5 million now, okay? So as you can see, the population in South Carolina has grown tremendously from 1910 until this year. Okay, so again, before, the basis of growth rate, how a population would grow, would just be the number of babies born minus the number of deaths, okay, number of people who die. Now, can you think of any other factors that may affect the population of South Carolina? Aside from birth rate, or what we call natality, and death rate, or what we call morbidity or fatality. Can you think of any other reasons why the population may change? It might become bigger, it might become smaller. But in this case here, of course, the graph would tell us that it has grown tremendously. Okay, so Jason here said migration. That's correct. Any other answer, people? Okay, so migration, of course, that means people coming inside the state or into the state. Okay, it might be from another country or it might even be from another state. Okay, so now here, that's correct. So now here, before I've told you births and deaths were just the basis of growth rate. Okay, but now they've already included immigration and emigration. These two here are parts of migration. Okay, that was the answer of Jason a while ago. So migration, when you say migration, it has two parts. Immigration, spelled IMMI, which is the coming of people from another place. Okay, and emigration, which is EMI. This is the leaving of people from a certain place. So say I came from the Philippines. The moment I stepped out of my country, I call that emigration, EMI. Okay, and the moment I went or I came into the US, I'd call that IMMI, immigration. Okay, so that's why you have your Department of Immigration, IMMI. Okay, these are for the people who just came into the country. You don't really have the Department of Immigration, okay, because most of the time we don't really care of who leaves. Okay, but of course, we'd always care about our security. So it's very important that you try to examine those people who would immigrate, those people who would get inside the country. Okay, so now our formula for growth rate does not only include just the birth rate and the death rate, but it would also include the difference between your immigration rate, people who get inside the country or who get inside the state, and those who have left. Okay, so now this here is the modern formula for growth rate. Okay, this is a modern formula for growth rate. Now, birth rate minus death rate plus the quantity immigration, those who got inside the country or came to the country, minus the people who have left the country or have left the state. Okay, so this now here is the formula for growth rate. Any questions before I give you the second key factor? Okay, so that's for your population size. Now, the second key feature that we have here is density. Okay, of course, when you say density, this is a measurement of population per unit area or per unit volume. So population density here is the number of individuals divided by the unit of space. Okay, so say my classroom size, for example, the area of your classroom, for example, is say 25 square meters. Okay, so that's just the area, the length and the width. Okay, if I have 25 people inside my classroom, then you simply divide the number of people by your area. Okay, so that means it's going to be 1 square meter or 1 person per square meter. Okay, so that's just number of individuals divided by number of space. How densely populated is your area? That's your density. That's population density. Are they all clumped together? Are they spread out evenly? Okay, so that's your population density. So this here is a map of the state of South Carolina showing us the densities of the different populations that you have for each part of the state. So as you can see, Richland County, okay, it's very densely packed. It is densely populated. Spartanburg, Greenville, your Pickens, these are also densely populated, as well as North Charleston. Okay, so some parts of Charleston are densely packed. Your Clarendon County here, okay, it still has lots of space. Okay, it's still not very densely populated. So this here again was done, or this was made in 2000. This population density per square kilometer. Okay, now how do the scientists measure the populations? How will they know whether this area is densely packed, densely populated or not? Okay, now we have 3 very important processes here. The first one is to count the number of individuals. By counting the number of individuals, this is done through census. This is done when your population is just small. Okay, your population is controllable. For example, we're talking about the number of students inside my room. Okay, of course, for me to know the number of people inside, I can just easily count the number of people I have here. Okay, so counting the number of individuals, this is done if your population is as small. Now, you also have what you call sampling. by the use of quadrats. I'm going to this slide, to the next slide to explain this later. And you also have capture, recapture. Okay, let's take a look at the next slide. This one is your sampling by the use of quadrats. Okay, now this process here is used for plants, those organisms that don't move, or for other types of animals that are not really moving so far from its original place. Okay, those organisms that do not really move. Okay, so you'd use your sampling by the use of quadrats. So what you do is you list down all the organisms that you have. In our example here, you have 4 different types of plants. And if you have this vast land, what you do is you divide your land into the smaller quadrats that you have. Okay, and then you try to get the sample of your population by looking at the different squares that you have here. Again, you call these squares the quadrats. Okay, so again, you'd only use this for plants because of course they're not moving. So it's very easy to count them if you try to contain them in a square. You can also use this to slow or for slow moving animals like your snails, for example. But you can't use this, of course, for your deers, for your rabbits, for your squirrels, those animals that are moving greatly. You can't use your quadrats. Okay, so this right here is the second process. Now, the third process is what you call your capture, recapture. Okay, capture, recapture, this is used for those animals that are mobile. Okay, those animals that are always moving. Okay, so example here that we have are the turtles. Okay, now, whenever you are doing your capture, recapture, sometimes it's called CMR. That means capture, mark, recapture. Okay, there is a formula that scientists, that the ecologists would use to get the population, okay, to get the number of individuals in that population. And this right here is their formula. What they do is they get the number of marked populations in the first sample, and they divide that into by the size of the whole population. This is the number that you're looking for. Okay, and that should be equal to the number of marked individuals in the second sample divided by the total number of individuals caught in the second sample. Okay, now by looking at your example here, the number of individuals that were marked in our first sample, that's the first day, there is a total of 10 individuals. Okay, so 10 turtles were marked on the first day. Now they are going to catch a number of turtles again on the second day. And they are going to get the ratio of those that are caught, those turtles that were caught and were marked, okay, the day prior to day 2. Okay, so as you can see here, you have 5 marked turtles out of the 10 turtles. That's your total. Okay, so what you do again is you get the number of marked individuals in your first sample. That's 10. Okay, we started with 10 marked individuals. That's for your day 1. We divide that by n. This is the number that we're looking for. That's the size of your population. Equals the number of marked individuals in your second sample. Okay, so your number of marked turtles here in your second day, that would be 5 turtles over 10 turtles total. Okay, so your total caught in your second sample, that's 10. Okay, now remember in math, the product of your extremes should be equal to the product of your means. Okay, so that means we multiply 10 by 10. That's going to give us 100. And of course, we also multiply that or divide that by 5 so that we can get the value of n. Okay, so again here, n multiplied by 5, that's 5n, equals 10 by 10, that's 100. Okay, so for us to get the value of n, we simply divide 100 by 5. And so we know that the total population would be 20. Okay, so that's the formula for your capture, recapture. Again, this is used for those animals that are moving greatly. All right, any questions, people? Any questions? So again, we said we can count the number of individuals that we have. You can do your quadrats. That's for your plants. Those are also done for your slow-moving animals. Or you can do capture, recapture. Okay, so this usually, your capture, recapture is usually done for wild animals, those animals that are moving a lot. Okay, so this is used for your sea turtles, your stingrays, your whales, your sharks. Okay, deers, they use capture, recapture. All right, now the third key feature that we have here is dispersion. Okay, dispersion on the other hand, if you have density as how tightly packed your population is, dispersion on the other hand is the spacing of organisms relative to each other. Okay, how much space do they have? So if we are talking about right now, you all know that you have at least what, 6 feet? 6 feet apart, right? That's the mandate of CDC. Your social distancing, your physical distancing, you should be at least 6 feet apart. Okay, so that's dispersion. How much space do you have between the individuals in your population? Now, according to your dispersion, you have three types here. They can be clumped. That means they can be in groups. They can be uniform dispersion. That means they're evenly distributed. Or their distribution can also be random. Okay, no exact measurement. Now, these here are the different dispersion that you have. So again, your individuals, your populations can be clumped. That means they'd always be in groups. Okay, so example here would be your schools of fish. Or they can also be uniformly distributed. Dispersion can also be uniform. That means they'd always be evenly distributed along or amongst the area that you have. And of course, random, that means there's no regularity in the way that your organisms, your individuals are dispersed, are arranged in your area. Okay, so this is dispersion. So again, the key features of your population dynamics, you have population size, you also have your population density, how tightly packed are the people in your area, or that can also be the third feature, your population density, dispersion, I mean, okay, how distributed they are, how are they distributed in your area. Okay, so those are the three key features of your population dynamics. Now, we also have two other very important terms here. The first one is your carrying capacity. By the terms that you have there, it means this is the capacity, this is the number of individuals that can be carried, that can be supported by your environment. Okay, so when you say carrying capacity, this is the max number of people, this is the max number of organisms that can be carried, that can be supported by your environment. That means, say, in my classroom, for example, putting into consideration physical distancing and social distancing, there can only be around 8 people inside the room. Okay, so 8 people, that's the carrying capacity of my room. Okay, more than 8 is not allowed. Okay, so that according to that is what your carrying capacity is talking about. That's the max number of population, that's the max population size that your environment, your ecosystem can support. Okay, so remember your term limiting factor yesterday. We've talked about limiting factors. We said this can be biotic, it can also be abiotic, and it restricts the existence of certain organisms. Okay, so your limiting factor would be hand in hand with your carrying capacity. Okay, there would be the limit in the amount of water that you have, amount of food, the amount of space, the temperature that your environment has. Okay, so limiting factor and carrying capacity would always be influencing each other. Okay, now according to your carrying capacity and your limiting factors, you have two growth models here. Okay, the first type of model that we have is exponential. This is unrestricted growth. Okay, your exponential model, this right here would show you a growth rate that is very fast. Okay, accelerated growth rate. Okay, so growth rate here accelerates very, very fast. It starts very slowly, but eventually it accelerates, it grows very fast. This is exponential growth, unrestricted growth. Okay, sometimes your scientists would call this J-shaped growth. J-shaped, because if you look at the graph, it's shaped like the letter J. Okay, now the other form of model that we have here is logistic. This is your restricted growth. And this type of model here takes into consideration your limiting factors and your carrying capacity. Okay, so this here is a more realistic model of growth rate. Okay, so it says there is the rate for acceleration, then there's going to be a point of maximum growth, and eventually your population size is going to reach the carrying capacity of your environment. Remember, carrying capacity, that's the max number of people that your environment can support. And so when that is reached, the rate slows down. Okay, the population now will not continue accelerating, will not continue growing, but it's going to slowly become reduced. Okay, it slows down. So this right here, sometimes also called your S-shaped model. S. Okay, your exponential growth is J-shaped. Your logistic growth is S-shaped. Okay, remember these two again, exponential, that's unrestricted growth without having into consideration your carrying capacity. Your logistic growth, this considers your carrying capacity. As soon as you reach your carrying capacity, then you see a flat line. And eventually your rate slows down. Okay, slows down, it might even decline. Okay, now this right here, I believe is our last slide today. There are periods that we call booms and busts. So essentially these are opposites. When you say booms, these are periods of rapid growth in population. And when you say busts, these are periods of rapid decline in population. Okay, so sometimes you'd hear people say, I was part of the baby boom. Okay, some years saw a lot of babies being born. Okay, so that's your boom, and of course the opposite is the bust.